Okay guys, so Chris here from IELTSadvantage.com, and a lot of you asked me to make this video on accent and whether accent is important for the IELTS speaking test. The answer to that question is yes and no. There are things that you do need to worry about when it comes to accent, but there are a lot of things that you think are important that really aren't important and could cause you to mess up your whole test and your whole preparation for the IELTS speaking test. So it's really important that we look at this, just because there are so many misconceptions, misinformation out there. So the aim of this video is just to cut through all of that noise and give you exactly what you need. So when you think about accent, and the number one questions I get asked are, how do I sound more British, kind of like the Queen of England, or how do I sound more American? The most famous American I could think of right now is Donald Trump. So what happens is, a lot of people think that if they sound more British or if they sound more American, they will automatically get higher marks on the speaking test. What really happens is something like this. So you think that you sound like the Queen, but you really sound as ridiculous as this picture looks like. I find this picture on Google Images and I thought it was hilarious, and I still do. But what I thought, it really demonstrated the point that, you know, you might think that you sound really good and that your accent is going to lead to a higher score, but in reality, you either sound a little bit ridiculous or you're doing things that are not going to lead to a higher score and you're wasting your time. So what we're going to look at now is accent important? Yes and no. So what you think is probably wrong. So let's look at the reasons why no, it's not important, and the reasons why yes, it is important. And then we're going to look at each of these in a lot more detail. And at the end, we're also going to help you improve your pronunciation, all right, and give you some resources to help you improve your pronunciation. So, sound more British or American. Sounding more British or American is not going to help you improve your score. We're going to look at that in more detail. It's not going to impress the examiner. And you have far more important things to worry about. So you need to prepare for the test in a very smart, strategic way. And we're going to look at all of that in more detail. So, but it is also important to a certain extent. Clarity is king, all right? It is really, really important that you sound clear in the speaking test. But sounding clear and having a particular accent are not the same thing. You also might have some problem sounds. So every English learner has at least one problem sound that they might cause a problem for a listener. And we're going to look at how to identify them and how to overcome them. And some students, and this is a minority of students, very few students that I deal with actually have this accent interference, where your accent might be so strong that it is interfering with the listener's ability to understand. And lots of people are ashamed of their accent, and I think that is a shame, to be honest, that people are ashamed of their native accent. But to be honest, very few of you have this problem, but you don't need to worry about it as much as you currently do. And we'll look at that in more detail, and also look at the other pronunciation features, maybe the more important pronunciation features that you really need to worry about and that actually do lead to a higher score on the IELTS speaking test. So, sound more British. If I had $1 for every student who had asked me how do I sound more British, I'd have more money than the Queen, basically. But there are more than 50 different accents in the UK, and I think that that is a conservative estimate. So what does sounding British even mean? So a lot of people say, you know, how do I sound more British? And I say, well, do you want to sound Scottish, Welsh, from Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, the West Country, Surrey, London? Where do you want, the Midlands, where do you want to sound like you're from? And they normally look at me with a very confused look on their face. But what most students really mean when they say, you know, I want to sound more British, is the RP accent. So some people call this the BBC accent. You know, if you listen to the BBC News from the 1940s. They sound a little bit like the Queen of England and the royal family, and very, very, very posh people. But to be honest with you, like less than 1%, I think, of British people actually have an RP accent, and there's nothing wrong with any accent. No accent is better than another, and people should not criticize people no matter no matter what accent you have. So I have I had a girlfriend in the past, and she was from a very, very, very posh part of Surrey, and she had a very posh RP accent, and she was actually bullied in school, and she got a lot of criticism from people because she had that accent. On the other end of the spectrum, I have an accent from Northern Ireland, and I have come across what name would I use for it? Let's say judgment because of my accent. I used to work for a very prestigious law firm in London, and during my performance reviews, some of the partners would often say, your work is great, Chris, you work really hard, everything's going well, but you need to sound more British, which this shows you that, you shouldn't judge someone based on their accent at all. And that is why on the IELTS test, you're not going to get a higher score if you have an accent one way or the other. And you're not going to get extra marks for sounding British, because if you did, Irish people, Welsh people, Scottish people, American people, Canadian people, Australian people, New Zealanders, all of the people who speak English very, very, very well as native English speakers, they would get a lower score than someone who just grew up in a posh British family. That wouldn't be very fair, and it wouldn't really make any logical sense. So forget about sounding British. Also, people ask about sounding American. Again, what does this even mean? Someone from Los Angeles is going to sound very, very different from somebody from Boston, or somebody from New York, or somebody from Alabama. There are many, many, many different American accents, and you will also not get a lower score because you sound American. Like, I don't know where these rumors come from, but I've heard students say that if you use an American accent on the TOEFL test, you'll get a higher score, but if you use it on the IELTS test, you'll get a lower score. It's complete nonsense. The particular accent you have is not important at all, alright? The particular set accent that you speak with is not really important. Also, people think that if they speak with a particular accent, they're going to impress the examiner. The examiner is not judging you on which particular accent you have. It's not like the examiner listens to you for, 10 seconds and says, oh, this person has a RP accent, band 9. Or this person has an Indian accent, or a Vietnamese accent, or a Brazilian accent, or wherever, and says band 5. It's not like that. It doesn't work like that. That's not how people learn languages or how people use languages. And I've had students who thought they sounded British but had very poor fluency, grammar and vocabulary. I remember one student who was a complete nightmare, who had lived in a bubble where they had learned British English from watching TV, and their accent, they did sound a little bit British, not really British, but a little bit. And because they grew up in a country that wasn't the UK, everybody told them that their English was amazing. So they were constantly told how great they were. But they had very poor fluency, very poor grammar, and very poor vocabulary. And I actually said to the student on the first day of class, I said, listen, to be honest, you don't belong in this class. I need to bring you down to a lower level, send you to a different class. And they were furious because they thought that sounding British was the same thing as the ability to communicate effectively in English. They are two completely different things. And you're being judged on pronunciation. So accent is a very small part of that. So 25% of your speaking test, you are being judged on pronunciation. But pronunciation does not equal accent, all right? Accent is a small part of pronunciation, and having a particular accent is nothing to do with it at all. And you, more importantly, and this is the most important point I want to make in this video, you have more important things to worry about. If you want to dedicate your time to sounding like the Queen of England, then that's your choice. Go ahead, and more power to you. But This isn't a good idea if you want to get a high score on the IELTS test. You have to be smart. You have to prepare in a smart way, and you have to prepare in a strategic way. Focus on the things that actually lead to a higher score. Grammar, vocabulary, fluency, coherence, intonation, sentence stress, connected speech, all of these things that the examiner will actually be looking out for and are actually in the public band descriptors. Those things are things that you need to focus your time on. To be honest, I've met very, very, very few students who grew up in a non-English speaking country and actually perfected the British or an American accent. I think I've met one in my whole life, and it will take you thousands of hours in order to do that. So it's really just about time and prioritization. Focus on the things that you need to focus on, and you can focus on accent later if that's what you want to do. So again, if you think that, you need to sound British or you need to sound American or it's going to impress the examiner and you're going to spend all your time on that, you're going to sound ridiculous and you're going to make a fool of yourself, just like Donald Trump does on a daily basis. Alright, so then what things do you need to worry about when it comes to accent? So some things are important, and the most important thing is clarity. Your number one consideration when it comes to pronunciation on the IELTS test, IELTS speaking test, is clarity. If the examiner can't understand what you are saying, you will get a low mark for pronunciation. So put yourself in the shoes of the examiner. What is the examiner thinking about? The examiner is listening to your answers and he or she is thinking, can I understand what this person is saying? In other words, are the sounds and the words and the phrases clear, easy to understand? Alright, so if there are lots of things because of pronunciation, because of accent, that the examiner is causing them a strain, they find it difficult to understand you, then you're going to get a lower mark. But separate accent from pronunciation, alright? Just because you have a particular accent does not actually lead to clarity, alright? You can focus on clarity in a number of different ways, but accent isn't part of that really. Also, you have to think about problem sounds. Everyone has some sort of problem sound when they start learning a language, and this has most of this has to do with your native language, because some languages are so different to English. For example, Vietnamese or Japanese or Chinese. These languages are so different from English that lots of Japanese learners, Vietnamese learners, Chinese learners, Korean learners, for example, have a hard time making the English sounds. So you need to figure out what your problem sound is. So, for example, I have lots of students from Chile and Argentina and Mexico, Spanish-speaking students, and they find a problem sound with them is the v and b. So they'll, instead of saying video, they'll say video. So they'll say b instead of v. So that's a sound that they can focus on and that they can fix. Vietnamese students often have problems with final sounds. So instead of saying I like your face, they'll say I lie your face. So not all Vietnamese students, but a lot of them do. My wife is Vietnamese, so I'm not picking on Vietnamese people at all, but final sounds, final consonant sounds are a problem for lots of Vietnamese students, and they also sometimes add an extra S, so they might say vocabularies instead of vocabulary. Just a problem sound that they have. And there are many, 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 many other problem sounds unique to each language. So what are your problem sounds? In this video, I can't figure out where you are going wrong, because I can't give advice to every single person, because every person is unique. But record yourself, listen to yourself speaking, or get a really good teacher to listen to you and tell you what your problem sounds are. And what is the most important thing is what is lowering your clarity. So if if a Vietnamese person were to come over here to where I live, and they said to someone, "I lie your fay," that is difficult for a native English speaker to understand, because they do not, it is affecting clarity. All right, so figure out what your problem sounds are and improve that, and I'll give you some resources at the end of this video to help you with that. So, other thing that you might need to worry about, but most people do not, and most people, when you speak to them about their accent, they'll say, "Oh, my accent is terrible," or "Oh, I really need to fix my accent." Most of my students, their accent is not a problem at all, but for some of them it is. But this is a minority of students. Some people have such a strong accent that it interferes with the listener's ability to understand them. This could happen to a native English speaker or an English learner. There are people who, I'm looking out my window right now, and there are people who live in my area, and you would find it extremely difficult to understand what they are saying, and other English speakers would find it very difficult to understand what they are saying, because they have a very, very thick, our accent around here is called the Mourne accent. It's part of Northern Ireland. But this can also be a problem for English learners. Like, I have a lot of Indian students, and sometimes some Indian students, India is a big place, of course, there's a lot of diversity there, but I deal with a lot of Indian students who speak very, very quickly because they're in their native language. They speak very, very quickly, and when you combine that with a strong Indian accent, sometimes that interferes with the listener's ability to understand what they are saying. And you must understand that pronunciation is a physical thing. Obviously, our brains control what we're doing, but if you want to really learn pronunciation and really improve the clarity of your pronunciation, you have to think about it like a physical thing. Really, it's just our teeth, our lips, our jaw, our tongue, all making shapes to make particular sounds. And again, I'll give you more information about how to focus on those sounds and how to improve your clarity and improve your pronunciation. Finally, you have other things to worry about. If you want one of the higher scores, you have to master higher level pronunciation features. So most of the students that I deal with need a band 7 or a band 8 in their IELTS speaking test. I deal with lots of doctors, nurses, architects, lawyers, professionals that need the higher level scores. If you want to do that, then you need to start to learn sort of other pronunciation features that are totally unrelated to accent. Word stress, sentence stress, connected speech, and intonation, to name just a few, will be judged. So if you want more help, and this is a totally free guide, you can just Google IELTS pronunciation guide. Just put that into Google. I'll link it below. If you're on YouTube, I'll link it below in the description. If you're on Facebook, I'll link it below in the comments. But it's a real step-by-step guide showing you lots of places where you can go and focus on clarity and intonation and connected speech and all of those things. So one thing from just that I really want to talk about, and I think it's really important, is don't be ashamed of who you are. Your accent is who you are, especially if you are not trying to sound like a different person. So if you actually sound like the people that you grew up with or where you're from, that's who you are. And what I hear is, when I talk to a lot of students, is they're ashamed of their accent. And I think that this is a real it's a sad thing, because you're really saying that you're ashamed of who you are. So like this person, who is this person? If you, let's say you were walking through a hotel or walking through a library or wherever she is, and you see this girl, you're just thinking it's a normal girl reading a book. But if she spoke with a particular accent, would you think that she is a better person, or would you think less of her just because of their accent? That isn't really how I think the world should be. No accent is better than another. A posh accent is not better than a more working class accent or a more regional accent. And a regional accent is not better than a posh accent. You should not criticize people for their accent, or you shouldn't feel ashamed or any guilt about where you're from. Someone who thinks that they are better than you because of their accent is really missing something. Something is missing in their life, and they're overcompensating for someone. Like, I remember I have been, because I'm from Northern Ireland and I used to live in England, 99% of people don't judge you by your accent, but some people do, and some people thought that they were better than me because of that. And really, I felt sorry for these people, because if you judge people on that, then there's something really missing in your life. And someone who judges you because of your accent is not someone you should be worried about impressing. So, like I told you before, that I was in performance reviews in the law firm that I worked for, and most of the partners were great. Most of the partners actually had regional accents themselves, but some of them didn't. And they judged me on that, and they said, you have to change. And I said, really, to be honest, I don't really have respect for you if you're judging me solely on my accent rather than who I am and the work that I do. Maybe that's a reason why I'm not working there anymore, but you know, it's better to be honest with these people. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. If you need any help, go to IELTSadvantage.com, facebook.com/IELTSadvantage for updates, daily updates on all the stuff that we normally create, at least one piece of new content a day. Chris at IELTSadvantage.com for anybody who wants my help, and youtube.com/IELTSadvantage. Please go there, subscribe, and you will get updates when we make new videos. Hope that you like this. If you did like this, please like, share, let me know in the comments. It's all free, so all we ask is for you to do those things. Thank you very much, guys. Hope that you enjoyed that video. Let me know what you think. Bye-bye.